name's Charles Banks. I work at a company called Ramsack in Godalming, just outside Guildford. The company Ramsack, we're an outsourcing company, so we do everything from the initial investigation of an existing company's IT infrastructure. We look at what we could do to improve it, and then go and implement those changes. And then after it's implemented and we're happy with the network, then there's ongoing support, which is where I come in. So we've got a couple of hundred active clients at the moment, so we'll go through and we can get phone calls from any of those, depending on their contract level. Depends on kind of the hours that they're entitled to contract for, and depends on visits and stuff that they get, because we have network consultants that go out to site on a semi-regular basis, again depending on their contract, that will go and have a look at the network, and they'll make sure that everything's working smoothly on site, hardware-wise, everything's looking good. And then I'm on first line, so I'll take calls and emails that come through and do the initial troubleshooting for the first 20 minutes, half an hour, look into any issues, see if I can resolve them in that time. If I can't, then pass them over to a second line team, who then have kind of a much more in-depth look at it, much more technical. They have a lot less admin, and once they've spent some time on it, they'll be working and liaising with the network consultants. If it's still a problem, they'll go through the third line consultants, who will almost always be able to solve it themselves. If not, then we'll kind of, between them and the network consultants, we'll be able to get it sorted. So for me, I came in the apprenticeship role at Ramsack, so I worked at Ramsack for about 4 weeks before I went over to London to do my initial training, whereas you start doing some of the soft skills, things like handling customer calls and things like that, health and safety, which always seems to be a necessity. And once you've done that, then you come back to work, and I came back for another 2 or 3 weeks, and I was back over to London to do some new Microsoft Training Associate MTA exams. So I did networking, I did security fundamentals, and I did server administration, which will all kind of apply directly to my job role here. There's loads of apprenticeships that you can do, which they'll tailor it kind of semi to what you're doing at work in order to make sure it applies across, and there's some sort of continuity to what you're doing. And so by the time I'd got to the end of that, I ended up with 3 or 4 MTAs, Microsoft Training Associate certificates, many City and Guilds ones, and a big certificate saying that I completed the apprenticeship. After I completed that, then I stayed on at Ramsack. I'm still here now, a year later, working in first line, and then eventually I'll move up to the second line team to work on more technical matters once I'm able to. I personally enjoy the troubleshooting side of it, and I quite like kind of problem solving, so that feeds quite nicely into what I'm doing here. And I chose to go for the apprenticeship route rather than, personally my background is that I went to school, I did GCSEs, 11 and 12 GCSEs, then did my A-levels, got 3 of those, and then I kind of looked at my options and decided I didn't want to go to university because of the debt, and because it takes them a couple of years to develop a course, and by the time you've gone through it, it's going to be 3 or 4 years depending on whether you do a placement year or not. So your course is automatically 5 or 6 years post when it was actually created, where it would have been up to date, and 5 years, 6 years later, in IT terms, is a generation, it's a lifetime, it's not going to make a difference. All of the stuff that you've learned is pretty much going to be redundant. So to me, the best bet was to go for an apprenticeship. The company I did, learn up-to-date skills and get the up-to-date qualifications, and get the industry-specific kind of training and experience that I needed. So in 3 years' time, I'll have had 3 years effective work experience, being in an office, being as part of a team, showing that I can actually work in that environment and have some sort of structured way of working, which you don't necessarily show through doing a lot of the university degrees. But I mean, how I got into it was I obviously decided I wanted to do an apprenticeship in IT, because I've always been interested in that problem solving side, and interested in IT. I kind of installing different operating systems, working with software, stuff like that in my spare time, just out of interest. And then I decided I wanted an apprenticeship, and I went along to some of the a couple of seminars about them, and I went along to Guildford College, where they're having an evening for potential employers that might be looking at taking on an apprentice from Guildford College, and spoke to some people there, one of whom happened to be a client of Ramsac's, referred me over to it. So I then started here, but I think it's very important, whatever you do, to make sure you make an informed decision, make sure that you go along, and before you decide whether you want to go to university, whether you want to do A-levels, whatever, that you have a chat to some of the employers and some of the recruitment agencies. I personally go through a recruitment agency, but have a chat with them and decide what you want to do based on the qualifications that they say that you'll need to have at the other end.